Welcome everyone to this Liquibase community meetup. This is the February edition. We will be talking about SQL mostly as our spotlight. But before we get into anything, we are going to do a quick poll. We always like to know how long people have been using Liquibase. Helps us shape the conversation, because that's what we're here for. Just here to talk about Liquibase, see what questions people have, understand where they are on their, Liquibase journey. Oops. And all right, this poll is in progress if people want to pick. All right, poll results. Okay, so that's good. Some people have been using it for quite a while. Some people have never used it or are brand new. So it's a pretty good split. All right, so that's good to know. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to meet the team. For those who are new, we are going to talk about the product roadmap, do a couple of demos. We have some exciting things to show. We'll get into the community corner where we highlight things that have come in from around the various social channels. And again, we'll talk about SQL kind of in depth, and then we'll have an open Q&A. So let's meet the team real quick. Nathan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm Nathan Voxland. I'm the project founder of Liquibase.
I'm Steve.
How long have you been doing Liquibase?
Oh, how long have I been doing? I guess since the beginning.
10 years?
Yeah, I don't know, 14 years. I forgot what doing the math. Way too long. Not way too long. Long time anyway.
Yeah. So it's in high school now. It's just a freshman.
That's right.
Steve Donie.
Hi, I'm Steve Donie. I have been with Datical for 6 years, so working with Liquibase all of that time, and now I am community manager, previously developer, still do a lot of development work. That's where I'm at.
All right. Mr. Robert Reeves, what do you have to say?
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Robert Reeves. I'm the CTO at Datical, and I'm the guy that picks up the tab at the bar.
It's true.
Good man to have around.
All right. Well, my name is Mario Champion. I'm a product manager here for Liquibase Community, Liquibase Pro. So sort of help strategize all the things that we could do. What are we doing first? And how are we picking those things? But we all have our hands, just so you know, Nathan has his hands in product and in engineering, and Steve has his hands in community and engineering, and to some degree product, and Robert has his hands in lots of places. All right, well, let's jump in. And I just want to point out that you can send us questions during this. We will be answering questions at the end, especially if you're new and there's something that we are not hitting that you would like to know. Throw it into the chat and we will get to it. All right, so a couple of quick updates. We have a new installer for Mac and Windows, and what's awesome about this installer is that if you have used Liquibase in the past, you may know when you start out, you have to download a bunch of pieces and sort of assemble it. You have to get the dependencies like OpenJDK and H2 database, that's what you want to use, build a properties file, build a changelog, and get going. We've made that very 1, 2, 3. You download the installer, a couple of clicks later, literally you are using Liquibase. So we'll show that demo in a minute. And we also rolled out a new product capability for Liquibase Pro, which is called Targeted Rollback, which allows you to pick a specific change set to roll back. This is super handy because normally you have to roll back in sequence. But if I have a change set over here and I want to keep these change sets, creating tables and then dropping tables and repopulating them can take a lot of time, and there's no need to do that necessarily. So this lets you skip over all of those, pick that one change set and roll it back. Nathan will be showing a demo of that and talking about it a little bit more in detail. So, like I say, if you have any questions, let's just throw them in the chat. So let me just go a little bit of this and then we'll jump right into the demo. It does make it super easy to get started. And all of these components and dependencies, sample directories and changelogs are delivered for you if you use the installer for Mac and Windows. And yeah, so let's just go to the demo then. Liquibase Mac installer demo. What you see here is the Liquibase page at GitHub, and you'll notice that now in addition to the tars and the zips and the regular ways, there is an installer both for Mac and Windows. In this demo, I'll be showing you the Mac. I've already downloaded the installer, so let's just open it up and let it do its thing real quick. Open it again. It's going to walk us through a process. You should just select the defaults. That is the easiest route to go, but you are free to put them in applications or your own project setup. So here we're going to go to user local opt, do the install, extracts, we'll see the things. And what's nice about this, separate, or different from the traditional ways, is that you have all of your dependencies that you need to get started. So you open up the README real quick, you can see what was actually installed. There's an open JDK, there's a H2 in-memory database that will help you do the tutorials and help you learn Liquibase. What's most exciting is this getting started text, and it will show you what to do to actually learn Liquibase and get up and running right away. There's some examples included in here in both SQL and XML formats. It tells you how to move them so you can get started. You will need to move it to a place where you have permissions to act on it. So let's just do that real quick. So I'm going to take this examples directory, I'm going to move it over to my documents. I will replace it from my previous example. And you can see here, now we have a couple of XML and SQL changelogs and properties files. It is also worth noting the properties file has been dramatically improved because now it has descriptions. It tells you what a properties file does, tells you how to find help to learn more about the properties file, and all the key value pairs in here are described. And the relationships of their paths are also described, which is useful. As well, if you want to start using some of the pro features, here is the URL that you would need to go to. So let's do this real quick. It's actually quite fast to learn this. So we've moved this. We realize we don't have to change anything to our Liquibase properties, and it says, all right, start doing this part. Open up a terminal app. Go to where I installed it. So let's see where I am now. So I want to go to my docs, installer, tests. You see here, I have my examples. And so as it tells me, run examples, start H2. And just like that, I have a little H2 database up and running. You can see I have no tables in this database. So let's go back to the here. It says, okay, so what do I do next? It gives me a little bit of knowledge about start H2, and then I can run my first update. So open up a new command line window, go to the same place and type this command. So I'm going to go back to my terminal, go new, cd internet docs. Yeah, go with the SQL, and you can see here, I have these things here, and it just says run Liquibase update, oops, or Liquibase update. All right, my update has been successful. It tells me to come back and refresh my console and see what happens. Look at that. I have all of these tables in here. And so I can keep going through this, and it will show me how to make other changes, how to copy change sets and alter change sets in either SQL or XML. It's all very handy, and I think that you will enjoy it. So take you back to here. Don't forget, you can find us at liquibase.org, or you can go directly to our website. Thanks. All right, so in that demo, you saw how quick and easy it is. I think that demo video is 4 minutes long, and I downloaded Liquibase and looked through the changelogs, the SQL and XML examples, and ran it, and there I was doing updates. And if you follow along, you'll see that you can, it shows you how to copy new change sets in there and make that experience quite easy. I want to just say that you can get it from the website. Go to download.liquibase.org, and you can see it there, and you can decide how to get it. And you'll see that you have, if you follow the links, you can get the installer for Windows or Mac, or you can do it in the other way with the zips and the tar files if that is more your thing.
Mario, hold up. Go back for a sec.
Yes.
Go back on the browser.
Yeah,
Hit back.
to there.
What happened? When did that stuff change?
We're always changing things. You got to keep up, Robert. Every day, you know, when you get up, you got to go just.
You take one flight to Dallas and all sorts of awesome stuff happens.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. Things are always improving. You know, we're trying to
purdy.
be agile.
I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. All right, let's jump into this. And as always, throw some questions into the chat if you have one. I can see that there's a direct link in the chat right now if you want to go give this a try. You know, maybe wait till the end of the webinar, or maybe not. If we don't hold your interest, just jump ahead. We'll know we need to be more exciting. All right, now let's go on to the targeted rollback release. We'll jump to another demo here in a moment. So the important thing to know about Rollback 1 change set, which is out now, is that it is like a Git cherry pick for rollbacks. And, you know, and like Git cherry pick, there is some awesome power in that. So you just need to look ahead and do your diligence that you are cherry picking rollbacks to or cherry picking change sets to undo that are not tightly coupled to follow on change sets.
Hey, Mario,
yes.
This feature right here, this is perfect for when development teams are using Liquibase and maybe the operations folks are a little confused, or DBA brethren, our database professionals. And, you know, this is really powerful to help them understand that you can continue using Liquibase and still roll back things without rolling back the whole thing. Because you might, those folks, those DBAs will be doing 10 releases at a time. And helping them understand, look, if you just have to roll back one, it's okay. You don't have to roll back everything. And even better, if development tests the rollback prior to deployment, which they are, right? Developers are doing that. This is also really powerful for, you've got multiple teams using Liquibase, and they might feed up into one release trunk. And then turns out that one of the teams didn't quite get their sprint done, and you need to roll that back. Those are the two applications I'm seeing. And I love the term Git cherry pick, because that's exactly what it does.
And, you know, the other advantage in especially collaborative teams is that you're not stepping over other people's work. So you're really affecting the database section that you are managing. And then just from a developer speed capability, if I am rolling back tables that I've created a table, so now I'm going to drop a table, and then I'm coming forward, I'm going to rebuild that table and repopulate it. And if that table is logically independent of the change I'm making, that's just wasted time. Dropping tables, repopulating them. I mean, it's automated, but it's still time. So yeah, there's some real value in that. And let's in fact go to the demo for it, and let's show some of that value. This one.
All right, I'm going to show you how the new Rollback 1 change set logic works. So Liquibase has a variety of existing rollback commands that let you roll back to a specific date or a specific tag, or specify the number of change that you want to roll back. But regardless of which of these change set commands you run, they all start at the last executed change set and then rolls them all back in reverse order. So for example, I have a very simple change log that I created here. As you can see, it has just 3 change sets in it. The first one creates a person table. The second one adds an age column onto that person table. And then the third one adds a company table to it. And so if I were to just run a regular Liquibase update command, it's going to apply all, sort of make sure that all 3 of those change sets have been executed against the database. And once it successfully runs, now I have both tables in my database along with a age column on the person table. But now suppose I realize that I shouldn't have added that age column to the person table. It shouldn't be there for one reason or another. So with the existing commands, I can just run Liquibase rollback count 2. If I spell it right. and you'll see it ends up rolling back the last two change sets that were executed. So it's going to roll back the company table by dropping it, and then it's going to roll back the add column change set by dropping that column. So now, if I was in a dev or test or whatever environment, I would edit my change log in order to remove that change set that has the add column for the age, so it's like it was never there. And then I can run Liquibase update again, and that will now bring back my company table like I need it, and still not having an age column in there because it's been removed from the file. So now, that works fine in development and testing because I don't really care about the data that's in that company table. It's fine to have a period of time that doesn't even have that company table because the application's not running, on my development machine while I'm working on it. But if you're in a production environment or some other time where you really worry about that data loss in the company table, those existing rollback commands aren't going to work. So this is where the new rollback one change set command comes in. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run update command. That'll get us back to having all three of those change sets having been executed against the database. So with the rollback one change set command, what you're doing is it lets us kind of specifically target the change set, that age change set column, without having to roll back anything that happens after it. So what I would do is I'd say Liquibase rollback one change set, and then I have to specify, the parts of the change set that I want, the unique identifier of the change set that I want to roll back. So that's the ID, that's the author, and then the file that it's in. So I'd say change set ID equals 2, change set author equals me, and change set path equals dog demo XML. So you can see when I run this, the command just as it is here, it does actually end up throwing an error saying, you have to run it with the force flag. The reason we do this is because, rolling back change sets that happen, not at the end, but kind of randomly in the middle there, can lead to some unexpected problems. For example, if you're trying to roll back an object that later change sets depended on, you start, that can kind of cause some unexpected problems. And so, we require you to add that force flag in order to sort of make sure that we know that you're understanding what's going on there. But like the message says, before you just sort of blindly add the force command, it's a good idea to add to run the rollback one change set SQL version of the command. So this doesn't actually roll anything back. It just outputs, this is what would be rolled back, or this is what would be executed. And so you can see what it's doing is it's dropping the age column, and then it has it removes it from the database change log table as well. So what I do is I would look at this script. I would think about okay, so I'm dropping this age column. Is there anything else in my database that's relying on this? Is this really going to cause problems with an application, or is it going to be good? And when I'm happy with the fact that that's what's going to happen, I can run my just rollback one change set command with force. And you can see that it just rolled back this one change set, and so now we don't have the age column, but we still haven't touched that company table. That company table is still there in the database. So the rollback one change set, it's a lot like git cherry pick. It's not a command that you normally should really be relying on, just because there's unexpected changes or unexpected problems you can have by rolling back things kind of not from the end like this. But it is definitely something that's good and needed to have in your back pocket for when you end up actually needing it.
All right, thanks. Let's go back to here. Yeah, and I think that's a very good way to sum it up. It's good to have in your back pocket. It's not something you want to use every day, but when you need it, you need it, and it's good to have it. Just like Git cherry pick or resetting. You don't really want to be doing that all the time, but when you need it, you need it. And
like an airbag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions that have popped up in the chat. I don't see any, so we'll just move on. Let's go to the community corner. Steve Donie, take it away.
Right on. Okay, so we've been working on Liquibase Pro now for a couple of months, and one of the things that has been an issue is that with our increased visibility that we are doing and making this a thing that we're selling to other people, we really are looking at the quality a lot. And that means that we need to have some processes around reviewing and vetting pull requests that are a bit more stringent than they may have been in the past. So we are working on that. One of the things that you will see in the near future is we're going to be migrating our issue reporting from Jira that has been used for a very long time, just migrating that into GitHub issues so that you won't need to create a separate Jira account. And if you use Jira at work and you want to do Liquibase Jira reporting, log out of your work account so that you can log into the Liquibase Jira account and report your bug. And hopefully this is going to just make things a little bit smoother for reporting them and tracking them. We're going to be using labels a lot more so that you'll be able to look at the list of pull requests and the list of issues and see where things are in the process. And we're hoping that's going to improve the Liquibase community and pro process in the very near future. We're doing this right now. We're kind of walking through a couple of pull requests just kind of manually. We're working on some automation for some of these processes, but right now we're working through a couple of things that were picked as interesting issues, basically. One was a fairly complex issue that not only fixed documentation, but fixed some of the documentation generation. Really cool stuff that we get in from people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
The issue with that is that it was targeted for the 3.8x branch, and some of the things that it did were kind of API breaking changes and changes to the Liquibase XSD. And so after reviewing that, we're like, we're going to have to move that, kind of delay that until the 3.9, basically our get back to master process. So now we're looking at a simpler bug that adds a couple of implementations of an interface to a class. It kind of gets super technical, but we're working through that right now, and we should start seeing the backlog of pull requests start moving through and getting applied in a much quicker process. We're also going to be tracking things like how long is it from the time that a pull request is generated to when it actually ships, so that we can keep some metrics on things and work on constantly improving that.
Mm-hmm. If I could add on to that, Stephen, maybe ask Nathan this question. You used the phrase that may happen when we make master master again. Very
right.
Briefly, that is because we have this 3.8x fork and or maybe not fork.
Yeah, that fork branch. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a master branch. So Nathan, maybe you can give a minute, because you've been spending a bunch of time making master master again. How do you think that's going, and what's going to be the benefit to the people in the community?
Yeah, so so basically, as we've been doing this kind of first round of pro changes, there was a set of sort of some larger, sort of functional changes we've been working on prior to the pro stuff that wasn't quite yet ready for release. They're kind of beta quality. And so as we're starting these, some of this initial pro functionality, we've been kind of building off of, basically kind of more patch releases of the kind of underlying Liquibase stuff. So we're not, adding a bunch of sort of the new pro functionality while we're, also trying to introduce a bunch of kind of more lower level infrastructure changes to the code base. And so, now that, we're kind of shifting back to, being able to kind of go back and start making some of those larger infrastructure changes. The two first pieces we're looking at is some fixes to the logging system that we use internally, and then also a shift to kind of how we find classes for the plugin infrastructure to fit with kind of the Java standards a little bit more. Now that we're kind of moving, we always try to support really old versions of Java because a lot of our users are stuck on really old versions of Java, and that oldest version we support has kind of finally moved past the point where some of the standard service locating stuff is available in the Java in the Java system, and so we're able to get rid of some of the old sort of custom logic we had around that had a lot of weird edge cases that would trip people up. So it's gonna be great to get back to that, and so we're currently working on that.
And this will help people in the community because it will be easier both to understand how the code is working, which makes it easier to contribute. And then when we have a single place for them to contribute and a slightly smoother, more automated process, we should be able to really move on those pull requests, whether we include them or not, a different kind of rubric, but we'll be able to provide some transparency to the people in the community who are really the most valuable, among the most valuable users.
Yep. Because the general process we've always followed and will kind of continue to follow is the master branch is kind of the upcoming major development branch, and so that's where most of the pull requests end up coming in through. And the patch branch, patch releases up to like the 3.8x branch, will generally just be sort of smaller bug fixes, that sort of thing. And so a lot of these sort of backlog pull requests are against the master branch because they're larger changes, not something that would just go out in a patch. And so we're sort of until we can get back to being ready to do releases off of master again, we're sort of stuck not able to take in those pull requests yet. And so it will soon be able to, and it'll be great.
Yeah, excellent. So there were a couple of interesting questions. Part of Community Corner is that we like to talk about things that are happening in the community. There were a couple of interesting questions that came in the last week or so. Nathan, Donie, do you have a favorite? I think Nathan.
Yep. I had one actually from Joe W. So shout out to him for asking good question and being a good Liquibase user. He had a question on mainly integrating with Java entity classes or sort of using JPA or Hibernate. His question was, how do you use the Maven commands to generate a changelog from a Java entity class? And then sort of related to that, how can you use Maven commands to generate a diff changelog or comparison between your a changelog that contains sort of differences in your Java entity classes and the underlying database class. So the answer to that is core Liquibase on its own doesn't have support for Hibernate or JPA, but we do have a Liquibase Hibernate extension. I'll put the link in the chat when I'm done talking here, but it's basically just github.com/Liquibase/Liquibase-Hibernate. And what that ends up doing is it creates a new sort of URL format so that Liquibase kind of sees your Hibernate entity classes as a database URL, and so you can specify that just the way that you connect to a regular database. You're just kind of connecting to your sort of virtual database of your Hibernate config. And so once you've done that, you can do all of the regular Liquibase commands like you normally would, whether it's through the CLI or through Maven. You can do a generate changelog against that. You can do a diff changelog where your reference URL is your Hibernate sort of connection, and your target database is your actual database, and it'll compare them and either just report it with a diff or append to a changelog if you do a diff changelog. So take a look at that Liquibase Hibernate extension for how to do that. He did have a comment in there as well too around documentation on it and kind of getting some more information about how to use it. As we've been working on our documentation improvements, we've been starting sort of on the inside circle around the core Liquibase functionality, and over the next bit of time we'll be expanding that out to sort of our to include our extension code as well too. So look for kind of better documentation from our side, but there's definitely a good chunk of it out there right now, both on that Liquibase Hibernate project. Also, we have our plugin, our extension portal, which is linked to off of the Liquibase site. has some documentation on it as well, or just general Google searches for it, because a lot of people use it. So there's a lot of people writing about it as well too.
Okay, thanks for that. Just let Yvette know we see some questions showing up. We will get to those in the Q&A. It's a good question and has a good answer, so you'll want to stick around for that. All right, you know, some of the questions that come in, I'm just going to move us into the spotlight section. Oh wait, before that, let's do this quick poll, which is around answering the spotlight question. So we're going to run a quick poll about how many database platforms do you use. You would be surprised at the number of people who do not think that you can use SQL with Liquibase. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. It is XML centric in many use cases, but it is not XML exclusive. And so we're going to be talking about that kind of at length for maybe the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, and answering questions around that later on. This poll will probably be closing soon. Let's see.
So Mario, when we say database platforms, we're meaning database versions, like you use Liquibase with Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, that would be 3.
Correct. If you're strictly you know, a different kind of shop.
Woo!
Now look at that. Well, so that's good. The 5+ jumping up there. Well, you know, so that's a good example of the sort of the power of Liquibase. So maybe it's not too terribly surprising. Yeah, only
early and often.
Yeah. So let's jump into then the spotlight on SQL. So oh yeah, wait, hold on. We have another quick poll. We'll do this one for 30 seconds. This is another very interesting thing about who uses the different kinds of change logs. You can use 4 different types. From our surveying of hundreds of people, SQL and XML are definitely the top, but there's definitely YAML and JSON users, depending on where you come from. I think a lot of the DevOps people end up with a very high YML familiarity, and they go with that. All right, yeah, SQL, the winner here.
Mario, I mean, I think that really speaks to, you know, with the number of databases that people are supporting and the number of different formats, you know, for our DevOps folks that are on this call, you know, it's important for them to allow their developers to do what they want to do. You want to use SQL, YAML, whatever, fine, go ahead. You want to use this with MySQL, Aurora, whatever, go. Just so they know that in their tool chain, they've got Liquibase, and that's how you get your database change out. Use it however you want with whatever platform, just use this thing and we'll get your release out. I think that's really powerful because there's too many times where like, oh, well, you want to update Oracle, this is how you do it. You want to update Aurora, this is how you do it. It's just better like, hey, we're using Liquibase. This is our standard. Use whatever format, structured document format you want. I don't care about the database. Let's just get that software out the door to production. That's powerful.
Yeah, and it saves people so much time. It's replicable, it's automatable, it's really quite potent. Nathan, this has come up, I think, for probably many of your years, so you might be able to provide some insights here.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. There's a common myth out there, and has been for a long time. You know, the Liquibase is a XML centric tool and can't use SQL. And yes, it definitely comes up a lot. We had a blog post recently that Steve wrote, I believe, that covers a lot of this as well too. We'll put the URL in the chat. I wanted to talk, you know, a little bit more on kind of some of the trade-offs, some of you know, kind of what you would choose. And you know, I've spent enough time doing consulting work that I know that the right answer to any question is always it depends. But you know, kind of help you understand this a little bit more. The other thing I'll point out as well for the people that are using YAML and JSON, I'm enough of a programmer that I'm lazy, and so I'll just say XML. So instead of saying XML or JSON or YAML all of the time, but you know, any argument for XML works just the same for YAML or JSON. They're really all doing the same thing. It's just a different format that you're storing it on disk. But otherwise, you know, they both get sort of parsed into the same thing internally in Liquibase. And so there's once it gets off of the disk, there's not really any difference between them, between those. And so really the big difference ends up being kind of more between that XML/JSON/YAML format versus SQL. You want to go to the next slide? So, as far as picking what makes the most sense, there's really kind of three major pieces to kind of balance for you. You have the sort of specification versus abstraction, your familiarity with the tools, and using some of the magic Liquibase features are kind of the 3 points I'll talk about here.
I noticed you put magic in quotes as if it's not really magic.
And since I wrote it, it feels less magic, but to everyone else, it feels more magical.
Saving your time is always magic.
That's right.
All right.
All right, so specification versus abstraction. So with XML, basically what you're doing is you're explaining to Liquibase what you want to do, versus with SQL, you're kind of more defining what you want to do. Kind of think of it a lot like with XML, it's like you're calling a third-party library function. If you're calling a string utils replace, or you're calling a encode XML, or send this make a post request to this URL. You don't care or know exactly what it's doing, both for better or worse. It's a easy function to call that does what it's supposed to do, and you have control over the arguments that are passed in that they allow you to pass in, but then the logic that happens in there is kind of sort of fully encapsulated in there. So it makes it easier for you calling libraries like that, but it does kind of give up some control in there. And so part of that easiness is not only just it's maybe less to write, maybe more to write, but you can have kind of some more complex logic in there that that you maybe don't want to have to manage on your own. So for example, one of the big advantages with sort of the XML format versus SQL, for those of the people that are using multiple different database types, is Liquibase, since you're explaining what you want to do, you're saying, I want to create a table called this, with these columns. Liquibase is going to do the work of figuring out what is the right SQL for your database that you're talking to. So if you have multiple different database types, the XML format is going to be a lot easier to have the same changelog that applies to all of the different database types. Versus SQL, you get enough variation in the SQL format, or sort of the SQL language for the different platforms, that it gets a little bit harder to have the same change sets that work across all of them. It is easier to do that now than 14 years ago when I started Liquibase. Databases have been better about being correct in their or at least similar in following standards. But there still ends up being differences. One, you're supporting Oracle and SQL Server, and one uses sequences, the other uses auto increments. You get kind of differences, and that XML format, because you're just explaining what you want to do, Liquibase can sort of figure it out for you. Versus SQL, you sometimes have to have different SQL that you're having to manage those differences yourself. Next slide.
That's a really good point, Nathan, because you're talking about cross database support. And I know a lot of folks are adopting cloud native architectures. They're moving to microservices. They're building on things like OpenShift and Pivotal so that they can go from one cloud provider to the next. But if you're not also applying that to your database, then you're still stuck. For example, if you go to another cloud provider, and you built this with, you're using SQL and Liquibase to target SQL Server, well, you're going to have to do the same thing. You're going to have to run SQL Server in that other cloud provider. So by using the structured document format, XML, YAML, JSON, if cross cloud provider, construction architecture is important to you, and you probably should look into the structure stuff.
Yep.
And that's initially why you built Liquibase in the first place, right? You were working at a company that had a tool, an application that you provided to customers that could run on SQL Server and Oracle and other databases, and you wanted them to be able to just pick the database, right?
Yep. And so, and using the structured format, makes it so that it's going to natively work across all of them. If you use SQL in that standpoint, you need to make sure that the SQL you write, it'd be up to you to make sure that it is cross SQL or cross platform, or or you have to, there is a DBMS tag to target them, but then you start having differences between the target platforms where you're saying, if it's this platform, do this, if it's this platform, do that, which is really kind of some duplication of logic and can lead to some unexpected problems. Even if you're using a single database platform that you target, one place that I found this really useful as well is from a integration test, sort of unit test running standpoint. Even if you're targeting like SQL Server or Oracle, I found it really helpful to be able to run my integration tests against something like H2 database, which is a really fast in-memory database. And I can run that exact same change log against H2, that gets spun up in a couple seconds, and I can run my tests, and they, I can see that my SQL I have is at least close enough to being right that it's going to be good. Versus having to spin up a SQL Server instance and run through all that. So even if your target platform is just one thing, there's still even sometimes where cross-platform can be useful for you.
All right.
All right, next slide.
We also will have some time for Q&A.
So the second one is kind of some familiarity with the tools. Some people love SQL and know SQL best, and that's a good reason to use SQL. Some people hate SQL and refuse to learn it. That's a good reason to use XML. If you're on the fence and can do either one, this one doesn't matter as much. But you want to be using Liquibase through your process, and being familiar with the tools and being comfortable with it is a big part of ensuring that you're going to actually use it. So you want to make sure you're using what you're comfortable with.
Very good point.
So the last one is kind of some of the magic features. The cross-platform support is kind of something in here where because XML is explaining to Liquibase what you're doing, we can do more for you, like cross database support. But there's other sort of those magical features as well too. So when Liquibase understands what's going on, for example, in the demo we had earlier with the rollback, I was using an XML format where I just said create table, add column, create table. Since we're explaining, since Liquibase understands what's going on, Liquibase automatically knows, okay, to roll back a create table, I just have to drop the table, and so you don't have to specify in your change log, what the rollback script is for that. With SQL format, we can't understand what's going on. SQL is just basically a black box on the Liquibase side. We just run it and assume what's going on. And so we can't know that what you're putting in there is a create table, and so the rollback is a drop table. You're going to have to specify that yourself, which isn't a big deal. But it's kind of more work that's not quite as magic. We also have some higher level changes you can do, like introduce lookup table that's doing a series of SQL statements in a single call. That's going to be, again, kind of a little more magic, a little bit easier for you. We have options to plug in the plug-in functionality, to do whatever you want with those tags. So you get kind of a little more of an abstraction between what you're asking it to do and what it does. So there's kind of some of those magic features that Liquibase can do that with the XML format you can take advantage of. With the SQL format, sometimes not as much.
Okay. There is another slide. Yeah.
And I think this was,
summary of all the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, summary.
Good job.
Yeah, you moved right through it, which is, there you go. And I do think that it is worth highlighting that you really can use both. And I think that'd be worth talking about for a minute, how to include SQL, even if you use a XML sort of master changelog concept.
Yeah, yep, I can do that. So yes, even if you're, sort of formatting your changelog with XML, with you got angle brackets around your change set tags, Liquibase has always had a just a SQL tag that you can put in, and it'll just, you can just kind of run SQL. So even if you're using a formatted, an XML formatted thing that has those create table tags and whatever available to you, you don't have to use them. You can always use SQL in there. The SQL is always a great fallback, even in XML. There's, what you can do with those, sort of library tags is, kind of trying to hit 80% of what people can do, but there's still always a lot more that the data, that you need to do to the database that's not captured by those Liquibase functions. And there's always that SQL tag to kind of fall back to. And so, yeah, when I'm saying SQL format, there's probably even kind of a couple ways to do it. One is you can just write SQL inside your XML or in your YAML or JSON, and it's, conceptually the same as kind of the other option. If we have our formatted SQL file, which looks less angle brackets, more just looks like a SQL script for people that like that better. But it's still just kind of specifying the SQL and not relying on Liquibase to kind of figure out what you're doing in there. And you can definitely mix and match them. You can also do, Liquibase has the ability to do includes files where you can have a XML file for a start, and you can include in some SQL files, and it'll just run those. So it's all you can definitely mix and match them.
And to extend that one a bit, that is in fact how the exporting of stored logic works in Liquibase Pro. So that even if you have an XML changelog and you have a bunch of stored procedures or triggers or views, when you generate those, it will put them in an objects directory, and it will put files, and it will be straight SQL. So it really is a mix in Liquibase Pro, at least, where it uses both just natively. And it's something that you can do by hand as well, if you prefer, and you don't want to pay for Pro. You can certainly include those, and using the include and include all, you can have the best of both worlds. And that really is, to getting back to, it's always do best what you do most. And if you do SQL, go to town. All right. So that brings us to the Q&A, sort of almost exactly right on time. How about that? So we're going to answer some questions. We would like new questions if you have some. I see a couple in there themed around issues of SQL. But first, we'll jump back to a question from Yvette C, who asks, is Liquibase Pro the only version of the software that allows rollback? And if so, does this include data rollback? Who would like to take this?
I got it. I love rollbacks. To answer your question, is Liquibase Pro the only version of the software that allows rollback? No. Rollback was added by Nathan many, many moons ago to Liquibase Community Edition, the open source. It will stay that way. So today you can download Liquibase and persist a change. You want to roll back, you can do that with Liquibase open source. In the case of data, so let's say you've got a, like in Nathan's example, creating a table. His rollback was, to drop the column. And sometimes you might not want to do that. Sometimes there might be data. For example, you made a change, it's been running for a while, and you say, whoops, yeah, we need to roll back all of the application. And you might want to, as part of that, drop that column. Now, there might be data in there. And so what you can do with Liquibase open source is create a custom rollback. There is a rollback tag that's part of change set, where you could specify maybe creating a temp table that has that column in there and doing a select insert and then dropping the column. So that is a way that you can save that data. However, if this is data that is related to the application, if this is metadata, like location of the SMTP server, the Google Maps API key, maybe it's different from every environment, dev, test, production. What I recommend is to always zap that metadata, truncate that metadata table, and then reload the environment config always. If it's customer data, if it's data that's stored by the application, a user of your application is persisting data, then just use the custom rollback tag. That's in there, that is free, that's open source, and that will remain so always.
All right, good answer. I see another question here from someone in the audience. So it's essentially, we talked a lot about SQL and XML, and you mentioned a bit about YAML and JSON. Are there any particular benefits or reasons to use YAML or JSON? Donie?
So YAML and JSON, as Nathan mentioned before, are functionally equivalent to the XML format. It's more of a matter of what markup languages are you most familiar with. If you're XML can get super wordy, and so YAML or JSON might be more palatable for that reason, that they're a little bit less wordy. But functionally, they're equivalent. You'll notice if you have questions about that, if you go to the documentation, all of the documentations will show you, here's a change using XML, and here's what it looks like if you were using YAML, here's what it looks like using JSON. So those are all just kind of, do you prefer UK English or US English? Pretty much the same.
You can also tell how long somebody has been in software engineering by what their preference is. So like old farts like myself, all XML all the time, but the cool kids, the hipsters, they're moving into YAML and JSON, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the middle range is JSON, and then the newest kids.
Yeah.
Choosing the YAML. Okay, so here's a question about how you store your change logs. What's the relationship? It's essentially, what's the relationship between change logs and source control? Where you put in GitHub or Bitbucket or whatever. How do you manage that process? So because it was mentioned, I guess, if you have teams working on things, how's that change log stored? Or what's a good best practice?
You want that one, Nathan, or I can take that?
You can take it since I've been talking a bunch already.
All right. Sounds good. So, there's all of these formats are plain text and work well with source control, work well with different merging and things like that. One kind of best practice that we will share with people is that if you break them up, then you have less likelihood of merge conflicts. That if everybody's working on the single master XML change log and 3 different teams each add change sets to the end of that file, you may run into merge conflicts. You may run into logic type conflicts where it's like, oh, this one should have been added before that other one. We may need to look at that after they're merged. Whereas if you're doing something where you're including other change logs in, like here's all the stuff for version 1.0, and then let's make another included file for 2.0 and another included file for the patch version 1.5. Those are all separate files, and that can be a nice way to keep things apart.
And in that process, you can go into sort of your master change log and reorder the sequence in which those nested change logs, the 1.5, so that it comes before the 3.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, which seems a good way to do it, especially if you are going to mix some people with SQL and some people with XML. The one benefit you left off was you avoid bleeding eyes from trying to resolve XML merge conflicts, where
right. Yeah,
that's never a pretty scenario.
No.
All right, I guess there's one more question, which is basically kind of the question we have here, sort of at the end. Is there any single best reason to choose a SQL or XML changelog? Like if things being equal, what's, Nathan, I see you.
It depends. Yeah, going to Nathan. I would opt for the XML, an abstract changelog format as your default, and then go into SQL when you need to. That to me seems like the best of both worlds. Get the benefits of the abstract format as much as you can, and then drop down into platform native SQL when you need to.
All right, Nathan, you concur?
Yeah, yep. I think the how many platforms you need to support is oftentimes kind of a driving thing, that if it's more than one, you're definitely best off in the more descriptive XML, YAML, JSON format. If you just are supporting one, it gets to be, a little bit less of a deal between them. It kind of comes down to kind of how much you like the magic that Liquibase can provide versus how much you want to just know for sure what's going on without having to run like the update SQL command for it to tell you what it'll do.
Okay, well, I think that does it for this community meetup. I want to thank everyone for attending and for some of the questions and comments. Closing words, R2? You want to sing us out?
Yeah, use Liquibase early and often. I don't care, SQL, YAML, JSON, XML. You've got way too much stuff going on. Like you got piano recitals and Little League games to get to. You don't need to be dealing with this crap. So pick one and use it.
Yeah. All right. On that note, pick one and use it. Okay. I want to thank everyone for attending, and we'll see you at the. Oh, wait, hold on. I, as a good person, must remind you our next meetup is March 19th. Between now and then, you can certainly get a hold of us in lots of ways. Our Liquibase, we certainly check there and post there. Stack Overflow, if you tag your questions, Liquibase, Donie will often answer them fairly quickly. I won't say within the hour, but quickly. And certainly Twitter, we are constantly aware and reminded of Twitter. So you can sign up for the next Liquibase meetup on the homepage. Melissa has posted something to the chat.
Chat there, yep, okay.
Yep, and we hope to see you in about a month.
Yeah, we're working out the details, but we might have a very special guest attend the next one. So stay tuned. It's going to be awesome.
All right. It's going to be Betty Davis, back from the grave. All right. Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.